Thank you very much, Tareen, for the invitation. Great pleasure to have an opportunity to connect all the way from Shanghai with people from all over the world and to be part of this community of impulse for women. So as Tareen was saying, and as probably you can guess from my accent, I'm based in China, but I'm not Chinese. So I'm Spanish. I've been based here in Asia for over 13 years right now, where I came as an entrepreneur, building my own companies, and eventually turned into, after some success, I turned into an investor, where I was a more traditional angel, a bit less hands-on with the companies. And today, after some success failures and a lot of lessons learned, what I do is I run as managing director one of the accelerators under a VC fund, a global VC fund called SOSV. So as you can see here, SOSV is the name of the global VC fund. We're a global early stage VC fund investing everywhere in the world. Last year, we were the second most active investor in the world. So part of our role is to work with the companies and help them nail their business model, optimize their operations, scale, and once the companies have been able to succeed in this very important part of building a business, the next thing, especially for startups, is you need to fundraise. Fundraising is not a measure of success, but in the world of very competitive, fast-growing startups, it becomes a necessary skill to be able to grow your company. So what I'm going to be sharing today are some of the key ideas that we share with some of the companies during this process of fundraising, so they can understand how this can be something strategic for them. Okay, the explanation that I'm going to share today is relatively generic. Is somehow an entry level presentation. So some of you, if you are more experienced, you have more battles already in terms of building your company and fundraising, you might find some of this information very basic, but this is something that is very important, are the fundamentals, and particularly the second part of the presentation will go a little bit more deeper in one of the key elements. So we're going to work under the assumption that you have an amazing business that is validated, that scales, and is actually ready to fundraise. But the issue that you might have is that fundraising itself is a combination of an art and a science, and we want to talk a bit more about the science behind fundraising. No, there's obviously something that a lot of people has done already, so there's best practices. I want to concentrate a lot of our conversation on one of the areas that I think it's more critical for fundraising. So we call this presentation Fundraising 101. At the end of the day, we're an American company, so sometimes we use a lot of these more American jargon in terms of how we describe some of our activities or some of the things that we do, and this is an entry level presentation for fundraising. Okay, so as I mentioned, we're SSB, we're a global VC. As you can see, all the areas where we have presence today, where we run some of the programs that we operate, and these are all the different accelerators under our brand. So we're a VC that an early stage helps the companies. We are global by design. We're industry agnostic, but we go deep in terms of our investments in three areas: hardware, biotech, and then cross-border internet is our approach to software, where we have an area of expertise in consumer internet, mostly designed for mobile-first markets, and then we have another area of expertise more concentrated on B2B and enterprise software. This is just, I mentioned, some of our numbers, the performance in terms of number of activity. We have over 1,000 portfolio companies, and these are some of our vanity metrics that we've been using. There's one that I think has been removed here, but I mean, we've always been very active investor in backing female-led startups. So I think 2016 were the second most active investor in the world in female startups, and as the world realized actually they were missing a really good opportunity by ignoring or discriminating women, and more investors started to get into that number. We became the number 5th most active investor in the world, which is the latest ranking that I was aware of. Yeah, you have it here, like number fifth most active investor in female startups in the world. That makes us that shows that we're very active, but also what is very interesting is that we're actually one of the best performing VCs in the world. We're the top 10% in terms of the financial return that we were to achieve. A lot of companies in the portfolio, and I'm going to go straight to this. No, every time companies come to us and say, well, we want to raise money. Why do you want to fundraise? Well, if you want to fundraise, if you're expecting investors to put money to your company, you're doing that because you need to prove them that you can grow faster. This is the reason why investors want to invest in you. And grow faster has a very different definition depending on what stage you are. Grow faster is different when your goal is to actually develop a product, develop a prototype, be able to get some validation, or you're in a situation where you're scaling within a specific region, or you want to expand to other markets. Grow faster is different in every stage, but you need to understand that nobody is investing in your company so you can survive. Survival is not the reason why investors will back companies. So you need to show when you are talking with investors that you have the potential to create something. You have the potential to deliver value. You are taking this to be able to achieve something else. And that achieve something else needs to be very clearly defined and needs to show that you are already on track. So let's go to the other side. No, I mean we talk about your side. Like why are you fundraising? By why does people invest? Why are investors investing? Well, very simple explanation. A lot of investors invest because they want a return. They want to make money. This is important to understand because ultimately that's what investors do. But it's very critical to understand that just showing a financial return, it's not going to be enough for a lot of investors. Okay, and that includes actually SSB. In our case, 70% of our investments are aligned with the SDGs. And for the remaining 30% of the investments that are not aligned with the SDGs, they are not necessarily companies that are not trying to deliver something else that's simply a financial return. We believe in companies that can make the world a better place. Sometimes the SDGs might not be capturing certain nuances or how in emerging markets, where we're very active investors in emerging markets, certain investments makes people's lives better, makes actually they become important stepping stones to be able to activate health programs that are collected that are part of the SDGs, education programs, fair employment programs, or in some cases some gender diversity objectives that you might need to steps to be able to make that possible. So that's something to consider. But at the end of the day, what is critical is that those investors, to be able to cash out, to be able to have a return, they need to have an exit. Okay, then an exit, I'm not sure if everybody is familiar with the term, but an exit is basically an opportunity where the investor will have the option to sell the participation, the equity, the ownership that they have in this company. That traditionally most people think that happen when the company goes public and then gets listed, and those shares start to be floated in a market where there's a possibility to sell those companies. But reality is that most of the exits will happen through an acquisition. Somebody, a larger company, a competitor, sometimes an investor that wants to take a majority stake and run the company will acquire partially or completely the company. Then to be able to go public, I think it's very obvious for everybody that you need to reach a certain stage. Unless you're big enough, you cannot go public. Acquisitions are sometimes not just because the company has not reached that stage. Acquisitions could be very strategic for certain companies, but you also need to be able to have something, okay? And that something, in most cases, need to be connected with scale. If the only thing that you have is IP, if the only thing that you have is patents, etc., some patents might be very important and very valuable. In that case, well, that's if you have something that is very difficult to achieve, that you might potentially have an exit based on that. But in most cases, it involves a business element. It involves not just on your ability to have that asset, but to actually utilize that asset in a way. And it needs to be something that when somebody acquires, they either acquire it because they think the size is big enough, or because they think there's a potential to grow and make it even bigger. So size is going to be relevant. Size is going to matter. So depending on where you are, okay, depending on where you are in terms of your company, the first most important question that you need to ask is, do I need to fundraise? Do I want to fundraise? And a lot of the people that reach out to investors in the early stage, the first misconception that they have is that they actually don't need to fundraise from investors. If they are looking for financing to grow their company, there are other alternatives that are way better than fundraising. Fundraising, it's also a commitment. When you fundraise, when you take money from an investor, remember the investor needs an exit, and you need to run your company to be able to potentially generate that exit opportunity for the company. So there could be scenarios, there could be opportunities where as a company that is venture backed, a company that has financial investors, you'll need to make different decisions from that point of view. Okay, so what is, assuming that those two elements that I mentioned, that they're real, they're already in agreement, and we check, you have a company that is ready for fundraising in terms of your model, and you have a company that has actually the fundamentals covered. What is the hard truth about fundraising for most of the early stage funders? Well, the hard truth, and one of the main problems, is that sometimes you have an amazing product, you have an amazing company, you have traction that is great, you have everything, but your packaging is actually not on par. You have presentations that really they don't make justice to how good your company is. They don't make justice to the opportunity. And when you're talking with investors that look through lots of companies every day, I mean, this week probably I looked through 50 companies, and this is a very special week, so I'm looking through more companies than I normally will evaluate. But you're looking through a lot of companies. So part of the ability of the early stage investors is to actually be able to identify the trends, the opportunities within a presentation that sometimes doesn't really deliver what we're expecting. Okay, it doesn't really deliver the information that we need. And there are situations we say, okay, this industry is amazing, this founder looks great, but I'm not able to identify what they're doing. And I had this situation with a company in an industry that I like a lot. I thought it was extremely interesting, and I brought in some of our experts because it was a very deep tech specialized type of area, but it was very difficult for the founder to articulate what make their company special. We were able to identify finally one of the areas that could make the company special, and the founder was still not even aware of that and was not giving even like any value to that angle. But for us, looking at the whole market globally, we can really see an opportunity there in an area where he has actually most of his traction in that area. Most of his clients are in that area, but he's trying to go somewhere that today is really packed. It's very busy. There's a lot of investors, and it's actually something that he is not. His company today is not that. So that makes the presentation very difficult. That makes things complicated. So what is the problem? What is the number one problem for these presentations? Well, the number one problem is that most people don't get it. Okay, these blah 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 that you start sharing, a lot of information, a lot of data, a lot of like facts that sometimes are confusing, and all of that. When you end up with the question, what do you do? That's the best confirmation that your message is not getting through. It's just not easy to understand. And I'm talking about people that in some cases, I mean, we spend a lot of time working with that. So it's not that we don't have the capacity to understand it, is that the communication is always two people. And yeah, you might have somebody that is more specialized that at that moment might actually flip and connect with what you do, but the ability to communicate clearly is critical. So when there's no clarity, when somebody that is trying to evaluate your company does not receive a clear message, they are not going to be able to understand. And if they don't understand and they have a lot of opportunities, what they're going to do is they're not going to take any decision. There's no decision, there's no action, and eventually your result, which is trying to fundraise, trying to secure the financial resources to take your company to the next level, that is not going to be that's not going to happen. Okay, so why do funders overcomplicate? Why are the reasons why funders overcomplicate? Obviously, you are talking about something that is your passion. You put a lot of energy into it. You put a lot of your dreams. You might have quit your job, invest all your savings, try to convince all your friends, family to support your company. So you know everything about the company. But what you're trying to do, you're trying to get really fast to your objective. You have in this communication the wrong goal. Okay, it's basically impossible to get cash, to get any type of investment commitment in an initial presentation. It's just not going to happen. The whole investment process is a process. Okay, there's no time in any initial interaction with any investor. This is not possible to be able to close any type of deal. Okay, it's just not going to happen. What you can do, the only thing you can do is try to get to the next meeting. You need to have enough information received, not communicated, received and processed that makes whoever you're talking with comfortable enough to decide, well, this makes sense. I want to spend more time on this. I want to activate maybe somebody from my team to research. I want to ask some people for opinions. So what you can get, you need to be very strategic. Even if your ultimate goal is potentially raise capital from that investor, your goal at this moment is to try to be able to get to the next meeting and get to that start being engaged in that process, and that slowly these conversations get asked. Because I mean, as I mentioned earlier, pitching, fundraising is a process, and this initial presentation, okay, is the first step. So sometimes funders understand better when they when we compare the fact that fundraising, it is a process the same way that sales is a process, or recruitment is a process. When you are evaluating a candidate that is joining your company, you are very unlikely to decide on a candidate on a first meeting. Most companies will have different meetings, and in every meeting, you're not going to be able to evaluate everything. Every meeting is going to have a certain types of objectives that you are going to need to have. And a candidate can be a really good fit from a functional point of view, but then would be potentially a very bad fit in terms of culture, or it might be a very bad fit in terms of the salary expectations that your company might not be able to afford, or there might be some other conflicts in terms of incompatibilities, or maybe visa and employment issues, or some other elements that can create. So this is a process, and sales, especially we talk about B2B sales, they are also a process. No? Like you'll need to go through different individuals that will have their own opinion about the selection. So fundraising is the same. And there's a lot of investors, there's a lot of entrepreneurs, sorry, that they still start the fundraising process, assuming that this iconic idea, this dream idea of you give an explanation and somebody's going to hand you a check, even without the name of your company, for a huge amount of money. That, I mean, it might happen. I've never seen it in over 10 years working with startups, running my own startups, helping startups raise millions of dollars. Okay, that is not something that I've never seen happening. I think Tarin wants to open up the floor for questions. So if you have any questions, please use the chat. I'll go a bit more through the next until I reach like a moment on the presentation. But the key thing here is to be able to achieve that clarity, to achieve that understanding that gets people to do things. We need to make things simple. Okay, look at these two remotes here. They have a lot of functions. Somebody spent a lot of time to design the buttons, create the functions, the software, everything. What happened at the end of the day is that most people will only use a small number of buttons. Everything else is actually making it more difficult for them to achieve what they want. Their objective, turn on the TV, change the channel, change the volume, which is like what they want to do majority of the time. Okay, it's not only better with all the additional functions, it's actually more difficult. Is becoming more complicated due to the extra functions. So here, what is happening when you make your presentation very comprehensive, when you make your initial message too complex, okay, what is happening is that you're making your objective more difficult to achieve. Okay, so we call that featureitis. That's something that happens to entrepreneurs not only on the investment side, but sometimes even in the product development side. Actually, it's quite more commonly known in the product development side, when you start adding features to your product, and there's a moment where every time you add more information, um, the user has more perception of value. Okay, but there's a moment that every time you add more features, okay, um, you can every time you add more features, you are actually creating more complexity. Okay, so look at what it says here. No, I might need to check the manual. I already created this extra function. Already creates a certain level of complexity. There's too many options. I don't know if this is what I want to do. You don't know how to differentiate them with your investor communication materials, with the presentation that you have for investors. You are having the same situation. Once you are at a certain level of information, you're adding value. The investor is getting more what they need. Once you reach certain peak, there's a moment that every additional piece of information is becoming confusing. If I tell you 10 reasons why I'm better than my competitor, the investor might not remember any of them. If you give me 2 or 3, I might remember them. You give me one, and that one is really, really good, and I have no challenge about that, and I'm very, very, very positive that this makes you better than that competitor. I will remember it, and I will keep that in the back of my mind every time I think about you and someone else. And there are situations where, yeah, there's not only one, there's like 2 or 3, fine. I will be very wary if there's 10, because 10, if you're putting like real very big relevant differences um together with something that is like yeah, it makes you different but not necessarily better, and not super differentiator, not super attractive, you're putting both of them at the same level. And maybe somebody will remember one that is not that unique. So by making that selection for them, you're making it very, very clear in terms of what they want. Okay, so one of the key things, and that's going to be the last message until we open up for more questions, is that to create breakthrough, to be able to really have a change in your fundraising success, you need to be ready to unlearn. You need to be ready to say, well, this took me from here to the next phase of my company, but now this might not work. An element that, and obviously when you've never fundraised, that's something that is relatively easier to understand, no? Because you've never had any level of success getting investors into your company. The problem happens here when you need to go from one type of investor to another type of investor. When you raise from friends and family, and then you want to raise from angels or micro VCs, people that might not know you very well, what you used to convince your friends and family, it's not going to work for angels or micro VCs. You need to change. Whatever made you successful the first time is most likely not what's going to make you successful the second time. And more importantly, once you've raised seed or angel capital and you are talking with larger VCs, what helped you secure that round, it's not going to be what's going to help you secure the next round. Communication is going to be different, the criteria is going to be different, the evaluation that they're going to get you is going to be different. Lots of elements are going to be very, very different in that process. Okay, so that's where we'll start in the second part of the presentation to talk more about the art, but most importantly about the science of pitching and fundraising, which, by the way, is not rocket science, but just accepting the fact that fundraising is not just art, and it's going to be there's going to be a methodology, there's going to be a set of best practices, a set of processes and frameworks that can help you not repeat the same mistakes that people did, and reach faster to what you want to achieve. That itself is going to be critical to help you. So Sorry, Carlos, I'm not sure if there's any other questions that you want to bring in right now. I know you wanted me to make a shorter presentation at the beginning before, and then some questions, and then finally like the second part of the presentation. Not sure if there's any more questions that you want to raise.
There is a question from Carlos. He is asking about how specific would you talk about the exit strategy in the pitch? Because he says that he received different feedbacks about it. I don't know if you want to wait until the end of the pitching, or you want to jump in right now.
Sure, we can talk about that. There are different opinions, okay, and there are different investors. My opinion, my advice to all the entrepreneurs that I work with, and the advice mostly common around my network, is that this is not something that you should talk proactively, okay? And when an investor asks you that question, you need to read between the lines, and you need to try to understand what is this investor asking. Okay, sometimes the investors are asking because they actually don't know, and that that might be a possibility. If they don't know very well the market, they don't know, they still don't understand certain parts of your business, and the potential of your business, direction of your business. So it's not they don't know the exit. No, I mean, every good investor needs to understand. Every good investor knows that the business of investment is not about deploying capital. It's about actually exiting. It's about selling the companies. Every business, and I learned that the hard way during my early days of investor. Every business is not about buying. It's about selling. You need to buy well, and you need to sell well. If you don't buy in the right way, but you're able to sell well, then you can make a profitable business. If you're really good at buying, but you're very bad at selling, your business might actually suffer. Okay, so the exit is very important. So most professional investors, not investors, should actually have an idea about that. But sometimes when they're asking you, what they're trying to ask you with this question is not so much about the exit, but they're trying to understand more about your business. They're trying to understand more about how do you see the company evolving into the future, and what is the potential. And by the way, this reading between the lines on what the investors are trying to get from you when they ask you a question is extremely important, extremely important. You always need to try to wonder, why is the investor asking this question? What is the reason why this investor is asking that question? So, and sometimes the questions are very straightforward. They just don't understand, or they just want to expand into something. You explain them some information about one part of your business, and they want to expand on something else. But there's also a lot of situations where there's more to that than specific questions, and particularly the exit strategy. That is a very, very, very important question, because in most of the cases there's actually a between the lines type of information. So the first one, as I mentioned, sometimes because they are still missing some part of your business, they might not be getting it, they might not see clearly, they might not be familiar with it, they don't see what is the potential direction of what you're doing. They want to see if you see yourself more as a technology company or an industry company. They want to try to get at least your perception from that point of view. There are situations where the investors are trying to understand, okay, what is your expectation, what is your aspiration, okay, for especially for first time entrepreneurs. An exit at a $10 million valuation and at a $15 million valuation, where they still own majority of the company, can be a life-changing event. You own majority of your company, 70, 80%. You suddenly pocket 7, 8 millions of dollars into your company, and this is a life-changing event. Basically, at that moment, you've changed your life, and it doesn't mean that acquisition doesn't mean that you don't get to keep working on your dream. Sometimes dreams are easier to realize when you are part of a larger organization, and that larger organization gives you enough independence to run things as you want, and will secure for you the resources, so you don't have to forget anymore about fundraising. Because I don't think anybody starts a company because they like fundraising. They start a company because they like the industry, or they really want to solve a problem, but not because they like fundraising, unless your company is specifically on that space. Okay, so the problem for investors is that investors in early stage companies, as I mentioned earlier, they are expecting a return. Okay, And private equity investments into companies are actually very high risk. They're not liquid. You invest in the company, you know when your money is in, but you don't know when your money's out. You cannot decide that you want to get your money back at any time, because that's not a liquid asset. You cannot cash out at any time. You need to wait for one of these liquidity events, for one of these exits, or maybe sometimes there's an opportunity for one existing shareholder or a new investor that will buy you out. But besides the fact that there's some nuances to that and there's some regulations and limitations around it, it's not easy. It's not like a listed company that you can buy and sell almost whenever you want. I mean, we've just seen a few examples of how sometimes you cannot do it when you want, but in general, you'll say that there's a lot of flexibility. So the problem here is that the investor is expecting a certain level of return, and when you are talking about acquisitions, you can try to guess, okay, is this entrepreneur looking at a $10 million acquisition, $5 million acquisition, 50, 100, 500? What type of investment? Because obviously acquisitions are easier the smaller they are. There's a huge number of companies that are able to make a $5 million acquisition. There's less companies ready to do a 10 million, less for 10, less for 100. Very few companies that can do a $1 billion acquisition, even like a 100 plus million acquisitions. There's less companies, and some of these companies will need more approval to be able to make that acquisition. So as you grow as an entrepreneur, you grow the potential, but on top of the risk of, am I going to be able to deliver what I want to deliver? You also have the risk of, is somebody assuming that going public is not an option, because that's an option for a very small number of companies. What you're going to have is a situation where you also might be in a point where because nobody's ready to buy you at the value that you want, you might need to go lower just because there's not enough potential people, organizations ready to buy. Okay, so that's why my advice is to not talk about acquisitions proactively. It also shows about it's like getting married and talking about how we're going to get a divorce in case we get a divorce. No, it's not the best way to start this process. But you need to have an answer, because you might get asked that question. It's just that you need to understand that question sometimes might actually hide something else. Okay, is there any other question?
Let's gonna proceed, Oscar. Thank you.
Okay, cool. So as I mentioned, the art and science of pitching. Okay, and I'm pretty sure, and if you don't know what's an elevator pitch at this moment, you definitely need to. You're definitely on maybe the 101, maybe even very advanced for you. But the elevator pitch is one of the most interesting and sometimes undervalued tools in the whole element of fundraising tools or fundraising frameworks that are used. At the core, the elevator pitch is based on the concept that you meet randomly somebody in an elevator, and because they're in an elevator and they cannot run away, you have the opportunity to introduce what you do during the time of the ride. Okay, and then after the ride, you'll be able to get the money from them, no? Assuming that that was an investor. So the reason why this is the most underrated is because the elevator pitch is not just a way for you to talk about your company with strangers. Okay, the elevator pitch is actually a prototype of your whole fundraising strategy. Okay, it's not even an MVP; it's a prototype. It's something that is short. Typically, elevator pitches should last something like 30 seconds. So it forces you to condensate everything, like the most fundamental elements, okay, of your company. Okay, the most fundamental elements of your company. It is really the foundation of your company. It's really the foundation of why somebody should invest in your company. And normally, an elevator pitch should answer 3 questions. Okay, if you're familiar with the famous golden circle from Simon Sinek, you need to be able to explain people why should they invest in you. And why should they invest in you has actually two answers. Okay, the first answer is like, why should somebody invest in a company in your space? Why should somebody look at something, okay, that is trying, any organization that is trying to capture the opportunity that you're trying to capture? What is the reason why the world needs a company like you today? The world, your city, your country, the region that you live, your continent, whatever is the geographic or the group of people that you're trying to target. No? It doesn't matter, but you need to have in that level pitch, you need to be able to educate people on what is your perception or on why this needs to be done. There's also another why, which is very important, which is going to be why you. Okay, why you is going to be extremely important, because if this opportunity is out there, everybody can capture it. So what makes you? What is the evidence that you have that you are better than other people in terms of capturing that opportunity? And of course, I mean, we humans need also tangible things. So you need to be able to explain people, what are you? Okay, what are you? And what are you doesn't need to be super detailed. It needs to be something actually very simple, because simple, remember, simple is understandable. Again, understandable is memorable. And when it's memorable, people can remember to take actions. And the action could be follow up with you, share with someone else, etc. Okay, so that's really, really, really important. Remember, this is the prototype. And the reason why I say this is the prototype and not the MVP is because it takes literally zero, like me, but basically what I was trying to explain is that when you create a presentation, because you've invested so much time on it, you don't want to change it. And what happens if you don't want to change something that has problems? That you keep the problem moving forward. Elevator pitches are so easy to change, because every time that you communicate that elevator pitch, you basically you have to create it, that you can change it. Okay? And the change is easy. Basically, every single time you deliver the elevator pitch, you have a chance to change it, and the cost, the effort of change is very low. Whatever you created, you don't necessarily have the same feeling. The obstacle, the barrier of change is not as big as it is with a presentation. Then this has more implications. Right? This has a very important implication, because when you're talking about a prototype, prototypes are not meant, particularly if you are familiar with the whole concept of lean startup and customer development and growth and iteration, prototypes are also meant to change. Okay, so when you build a presentation, you spend a lot of time, you hire a designer, you don't want to change it. And that happens because you have the assumption initially that the way, first, that your current business, the way it is described, is exactly what needs to be used to convince investors. And unfortunately, that's not what happens. Okay, what happens is that you will have to go through a process of iteration. You'll need to go through a process of iteration, because maybe what you believe is the most important element of your business ends up not being the most important element of your business. So that this using these elevator pitches allows you to practice with a lot of people. You go to an event, you run basically, you talk with like 20-25 people about your company, and they don't necessarily need to be investors. They could be other people, particularly at the beginning of this process. Remember, we're talking about a process. And if nobody understands, nobody cares about it, what they ask you is like, what do you do? Or they ask you, so what makes you better at this other company? Or they ask you, why should somebody build a business on that area? If you have these type of questions, they are basically giving you extremely valuable feedback. They're giving you feedback on, they don't actually see the fit, or they might be giving you feedback like the angle that you're using is not the right one, or they might simply be telling you, I don't get it. I mean, if you know positively that there's a really big opportunity and they don't get the opportunity, it might be that simply they don't get it. Okay, so going back to the basics, remember the elevator pitch. These experiments that you run, you meet randomly this person in the elevator, you tell them that you've got this idea, and then you've got a deal. After the 30 seconds of the elevator pitch, you've got a deal and you receive your investment. That's how the elevator pitch is going to work. Well, remember, no, what you might get of that elevator pitch is a meeting, is a business card, is a willingness to meet with you, and that is validation. Okay, that is validation. That is telling you, okay, seems that I have something that this person believes is interesting, that this person believes is something worth spending a little bit more of his or is there any question that yep. Tony, is there any question that anybody's asking?
No, not right at the moment.
Okay, cool, perfect. Let me reshare again on the slides where we were. Okay, cool. So as I was saying, no, like you receive all of these opportunities to talk with companies, and if those companies are not relevant for me, for the entrepreneur might actually be a waste of time to have a meeting if their goal is already, especially when they already have their message so clear and they know what they want. If I'm not going to invest in their company, their potential opportunity to work with us is very limited. So they might not be interested. So if they have limited time, and in their limited time they need to run the company, recruit new talent, and talk with investors, out of respect, I should tell them, well, I mean, I'm not interested in your company, so you don't have to waste your precious limited time talking with me, because even if you're an amazing company, if you are a biotech company, I'm not gonna invest in you because I don't invest in biotech. If I think it's really good, I might forward it to my biotech colleagues that might be willing to look at the company, no? And that could be one of the benefits of having a very clear pitch. I know it doesn't matter for me, but I can introduce you to my colleagues that invest in biotech, or if somebody is in an area that we don't invest, and I have another investor friend that I know they like that area, I could potentially introduce that opportunity to them. Okay, so so my suggestion for everybody is always to really go through this process of starting from the basics, okay, and really look at the basics of your company. Look at what we call the molecule, where you're trying to identify for your product who are the target customers, what is the pain that they have, okay, and what makes your solution better than anything else. This is going to be the foundation of your elevator pitch, at least on the first part of your elevator pitch. No, describing properly the problem, okay, is going to be the best way for people to understand, for any potential investor to understand why a company like yours needs to exist in the world. A combination of problem and the people and the potential customers are going to give potentially the investor an understanding of how big is that pain, how many people, how many organizations have that pain, and how relevant is that pain, no? Which would be a very important element. And then finally, knowing a bit more about the solution and what makes your solution better than anything out there in the market, particularly if there are already existing players or there's a legacy solution to solve that, it's going to explain them what is your edge. Okay, what is the reason why you have an opportunity to outcompete an existing player that might have a dominant position in the market. This is something that is extremely important for any initial presentation, and any communication to investors need to be able to address that in a very clear and simple way. Something that as an investor, I can repeat to any of my colleagues relatively fast, so they get the whole point. Okay, so market, I know the opportunity out there, I know the size of the opportunity, and I know what is your competitive advantage compared to anybody that exists in the market. You don't need to go in detail. You need to talk about who are your competition. You don't need to talk about market size in terms of number of people or number of millions, but you need to be able to at least make sure that it's understandable, at least to a level, who are the customers that could benefit from that. So when you start this process, okay, you will have multiple pitches. Okay, you will have very different ideas. Okay, and some of them probably, most of them probably going to be true. They're going to be, okay, I have these customer personas and they have these pain points where they could potentially use my product, and my product is better for others, compared to using, if we use this type of criteria. That's where you need to come, and you need to be able to move forward. Okay, that's what we need. We got to the problem number two. Once we get the clarity, and I want to make this comment here about the clarity. Sometimes when you're presenting a company in an industry that is relatively new, or there's certain facts that are unknown by uh, general investors, particularly if you're pitching to like general investors, not very industry specific, or geography specific, you might need to add those to create context. Okay, if you're not able to create context, for example, when we started to invest in esports, in competitive gaming, 3 years ago, a lot of people didn't know anything about esports. At least in certain industries, they were not that aware of esports. So you need to, once you explain the viewership, when you explain the size and the follower base that esports had, suddenly a lot of people, a lot of investors started to be, wow, I mean, this is larger than most media. Are you sure this is true? Yeah, look at the data. It is true. You can go and check how many people watch the finals of League of Legends, and you can compare with the amount of people that watch the final of the NBA, or some other like already well-known type of media. So that's going to be very, very important. Okay, that leads us to problem two. Okay, which somehow connects with this. No? We know that your product is amazing. Okay, you're starting this company that is great, and you said to jump ship from a potentially safer opportunity, because you want to do that. We're not going to challenge that. But the issue is that everybody else's is also amazing. There's a lot of people trying to build businesses. Everybody else is half. And when you're looking through so many companies every single day, when you have your existing portfolio that you need to work with, where you might not be a full-time angel and you're doing other stuff in your life, your attention span, your capacity to remember is closer to this guy. You will forget things relatively fast, meaning you need to be able to find a way to stick. You need to be able to find a way to not bore people, not make everybody go through this process of forgetting all the massive amount of data you're sharing, and give them the reasons why they need to remember you. Okay, so the way you organize the information, the way you deliver that information is very important. Okay, you need to make people care. You need to make people care. It's not just about having elevator pitches. You need to have a great elevator pitch. You need to have an elevator pitch that sticks. You need to have an elevator pitch that allows people to understand what you do and feel excited about what you're doing. Feel excited enough to decide that they want to talk with you if they have something to do, or they feel, well, I mean, this is so amazing that I need to share with someone else. Okay, you might be talking with another fellow entrepreneur, and this fellow entrepreneur has her or his own angel investors already, and said, boy, I need to really introduce this to my angel because you sound like amazing in what you're doing. Okay, so getting there is not something that we can do through analysis. Okay, we need to get out of the building. We need to get out and talk. We need to go through that process that I was talking earlier, where you need to be able to communicate with people. And communicate with people, again, it doesn't mean only with investors. It means that you can talk with others. As long as you don't talk with your grandma, with your parents, because they will tell you, oh, son, daughter, what you're doing is so amazing that, yeah. You need to talk with people that will give you like harsh feedback. And harsh feedback sometimes is not going to be well. I think you have no future, no opportunities. Most people will not give you feedback this way. The way they will give you feedback would be more on the way they will give you feedback would be more on asking you if through the questions that they ask you, you feel that they really didn't understood and they're not excited because they're not trying to get deeper into anything. It probably means that you are not being exciting, or you are not able to really connect with them and communicate what you're doing. So you need to try a lot of things. Okay, you need to try until you get the right recipe. And again, the elevator pitch is a perfect tool to test those foundations of your presentation. Okay, remember that there's going to be two very different stages. Okay, you're going to start working on an exploration phase, and with that exploration phase, remember that we had all of these numbers of potential models to run that. You need to go through that exploration phase. Okay, sometimes you can work with certain types of experts, people that knows and has more some mentors that might have more experience in the space, and they will give you some educated guesses. But our advice, and I include myself, our advice are always a guess. At the end of the day, you need to trust the power of the crowd, and most importantly, the qualified crowd, those that are there ready to invest. And once you get into something that you see that it gets you a very good conversion, it gets you a very good level of interest, then you'll move to a process of refinement, and that could be a moment where for most refinement, okay, you can potentially start getting into more details. No, the point is make sure that you go through refinement once you start getting some interesting feedback, because you might otherwise miss the best solution. No? And this learning and adapting is going to be very important. No? There's a lot of companies that can very easily be introduced in different ways. No, I mean, we had remember having a founder that was extremely for what reason I will understand, he loved the idea of being a multi-sided marketplace, and he thought that would make his company so interesting that everybody would be willing to invest. From the point of view of an investor, a multi-sided marketplace is an extremely difficult type of model, because you depend on multiple sides to agree to be able to have any type of transaction happening. So that what he was trying to do, being so obsessed with that way to present his company, is that he was not able to get any interest. On the other side, when he started to try another direction and he positioned himself as an e-commerce company, suddenly his e-commerce model looked way more interesting, because there was a clear decision maker and there were a set of suppliers that will facilitate that. But it was very clearly defined that there's a side of the marketplace in that case and make all the decisions. And well, the fact that you are a multi-sided marketplace doesn't mean that you need to introduce yourself at that, because he was being killed or he was being ignored even in the first phases of this communication. Okay. What is the reason why this is so important? Okay, the real reason, but this is important, and finding this harsh, honest feedback, is that nobody wants to look down. There's a lot of people that will not understand what you do and say, "Oh, yeah, your company is great. You'll be able to be very successful. Yeah, go for it. Congratulations, go for it." And you can say that if you want to be nice, but you're not helping people. You're not helping people. Okay, this is what we call ruinous empathy. It's actually not what we call, but in this framework called radical candor, it's called ruinous empathy. People that they care, they don't want to hurt your feelings, but to a certain degree, they're not challenging you. They're not being honest with you. They're trying to be nice, but they're not honest. Okay, and I think a lot of us have been in that situation where somebody comes and tells you about something, and you have doubts about it, but you don't want to create any conflict. So you just tell them, "Oh yeah, sure, yeah, go for it, go for it." You're gonna have a lot of those with your elevator pitch, and you need to make sure that you are able to create an environment for feedback, an environment for questions, an environment for challenge, where people can tell you the real opinions, where people can in a nice way, okay, in a nice way, make sure that they can tell you whatever is wrong. Because if something is wrong and you cannot see it or you cannot be aware of it, you cannot change it. There's nothing you can do. You cannot solve a problem that you don't know that you have. Okay? So you need to create that environment. In fact, the situation is so I mean, this situation of the ruinous empathy is so bad that you might go this path believing this is the right thing to do and eventually have no option. So if you have to choose, okay, and people cannot be here in this radical candor where they are honest and they challenge you directly, but at the same time they care personally and they do it to try to help out in a constructive way, you'd rather have people, okay, that they are like just aggressive with you. It's okay. It's better to have an asshole telling you what is wrong in your company, because I mean, if they're wrong, you don't have to. You don't have to. If you disagree, you don't have to follow their advice. But at least they're raising a flag on, hey, have you looked at this? If they tell you, well, I think that your monetization model is a piece of shit. If they tell you that, they're not being particularly nice with you, but at least they're letting you know there might be an issue with your monetization model. How did you reach the conclusion that this was the best one? Have you explored these other alternatives? That could be a way more like a nice, nicer, a more constructive way to talk about that. But if somebody tells you, oh, I think your monetization model is really good, yeah, you should go for that one. If they tell you that and they don't let you know that there's a problem with your monetization model, you're never going to change it. And if it's really wrong, you will not be able to find out until maybe it's too late, and you might have run out of resources, or maybe someone else might have taken over the space that you're going through. So this is an extremely important element of making sure that your fundraising goes great. You need to have this contact with reality, and this contact with reality needs to be honest. Okay. Another element in terms of contact with reality. Okay, investors are people. Okay, yeah, we're humans. We have families. We have emotions. We have interests. We have hobbies, etc. A lot of this communication, particularly in the early stage, it's gonna require you to be able to have an emotional connection. You need to have that emotional connection, not necessarily with them. Potentially, that could be them creating some level of empathy and connection with whoever has the problem. They need to feel that when you're talking about the need, when you're talking about the opportunity, when you're talking about why the customer today is not able to solve that challenge that they have, why that desire that they have is not being fulfilled, you need to make them feel the need, the urgency. They need to feel, well, this needs to be solved right now. If somebody comes and brings me something better, I'll jump on it. You need to create that not just logic connection, but that emotional connection. And of course, don't be aggressive. Okay, that's something that I've seen a lot also for some founders, and that creates a massive rejection, and it doesn't work. No, I mean, one thing is that you are consistent. One thing is that you follow up, and that's obviously greatly advised, because sometimes we're humans, we miss things, we forget things. So please follow up, but try to make sure that all the follow-ups are not, have you received my email? Yeah, in most cases I've received my email, but maybe when I read it, I didn't thought it was very important, I didn't have time to reply to you, and I forgot. So yeah, I received your email. Try to think about ways to add more value. So if the information that you send me is not enough for me to be interested in your company, try to add something else. Sometimes when you're trying for a minimum viable product, you want it minimum, but you want it viable. And you might find out that certain parts of your elevator pitch or your investor presentation are not viable. They're minimum, but they're not viable. You might need to add more. So if you are following up with investors, just don't be aggressive. Don't be just follow up without any type of logic. Try to add value, extra value in every one of these additional interactions. Okay, a couple of secrets, a couple of ideas as we wrap up. The first 5 seconds of any presentation are critical. Okay, that's where most of the audience decides, should I listen to this person, or should I should I think about my own problems? What I'm going to have for dinner today, what I'm going to do with the kids during the weekend, this portfolio company is doing this, what other person do I want to meet in this event? So make sure that when you start this presentation, you follow the rule of most of the TED Talks. Okay, so most of the TED Talks, if you watch TED Talks, very few of them start saying like, yeah, I'm Peter and my company is this one. I mean, what they do is they look for a sentence that will be strong, a sentence that will capture people's opinion, a sentence that in these 5 seconds will make as many people as possible decide, oh, this is something interesting. I want to hear what this person has to share. You want them to decide consciously that instead of checking their WhatsApp or checking anything else, they're going to be actually listening to you. Okay, so first you need to make them care. Once they care, that's the best moment and time to introduce who you are, your name, how to contact with you. Okay, always start by educating the audience. Okay, surprising, create that emotional connection, not by talking about you, but talking about the reason why your company should exist. Okay. So yeah, those are some books that you can use if you want to look at ways to open that. And very simple and honestly extremely valuable best practice: write down your elevator pitches. Okay, if you go to an event, don't I mean you have to adapt on the ground, but go with some existing assumptions. Go there with some ideas of what are the things that you want to test and measure. If you're going to be pitching to 10 people, 15 people, you go there with two approaches of your elevator pitch and you test which one works better. You said, well, I tried this 10 times and I got this, assuming it's random, okay? And that's not a big assumption sometimes, assuming it's random. Look at the hard data of, okay, how many people agreed with this pitch? How many people agreed with that other pitch? How many questions did I get with that pitch? How much feedback do I get? Which one actually I have evidence and not just the impression that things are better. And it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if the suggestion on that idea came from an intern, from your mom, from an investor, or from a professional pitch coach. It doesn't matter. Whatever the customers say, whatever the audience says, probably is what actually matters. Assuming it's a qualified audience. Okay. So this allows you to track things. This allows you to process feedback, and this allows you to keep what worked. And if you have a team of co-founders that are going to be representing the company, or you're going to send some of your team members to represent your company in an event, you can use that to also make sure that you keep things consistent. Okay. I think we might have another question. No, we don't have any question now. I mean, as you can see, I can talk forever. Okay, so I'm sharing some of the wisdom accumulated talking with helping companies through this process. But is there anything more relevant for the audience? Just feel free to ask, and I'm happy to adapt. And assuming no questions, and I don't know if this is good or bad. In terms of everybody's like it is very clear, or it is too basic, or I didn't manage to engage you. But well, let's continue with the presentation. Let's go to the step 3, and let's go to step 3 on what problem. What will be the third problem that we see in this process, right? And potentially you might find. So until now, okay, we've covered things that mostly are it shows that you are a good analyst. It shows that you are a good consultant. You're able to identify an opportunity, and you're able to design a good solution. But as I mentioned earlier, there's a very important why, which is why you. There's a lot of people with good ideas, a lot of people with very good skills to identify opportunities, but not everybody is ready to jump. Not everybody is ready to make that leap of getting from where everybody is to like this bigger, better, and less crowded space and create new things. So your capacity to execute, okay, is what makes you credible. Okay, this is what we call traction. Okay, this is what investors talk about. Okay, what have you achieved so far? What is what evidence do you have that what you're doing works? What evidence do you have that you have the capacity to make things happen? Okay, so ideally, it's not just validation of what you do; it's also validation of what you have done. Okay, that not just that. Okay, my idea works, but I also have the idea. My team also has the idea to make things happen. The more quantitative and more objective that that traction could be, the best. If you don't have that, you can always go for milestones, which in some cases might actually be very, very relevant. If you sign out your first client, if you launch your first POC, if you got a like a certification for what you're doing, like a clinical trial, etc., that's good. Last option, well, you have name dropping, and when I mean name dropping, that could be name dropping in terms of some of the people that you're talking with, might be also your investors, you might be your, if you have any, the team, etc. So moving forward slightly faster right now, what is the next problem? Like that one is critical, and we could spend like for a long time to have a conversation about this one. But there's an element that is very important. Remember always that you are fundraising, okay? And a lot of people forget to ask, and most importantly, forget to think about what they want. Okay, you need to be able to get what you want by asking it and be able to justify. So when you have funders coming, yeah, we want 5 million or 10 million or 20 million or whatever amount of millions that they're looking for, if you're not able to argue, if you're not able to explain why they want that, that actually will make you lose a lot of reputation. Okay, so you need to be ready to ask and to be realistic about what you're asking. Okay. One of the key things that happens in some situations, that sometimes when you ask for money, you might get advice. That's a very common that's a very common situation, and what I've seen sometimes is that if you ask for advice, you might actually get money. No? Sometimes, particularly in the early stage, investors want to see coachable funders. And you know, the worst thing of asking for advice and not getting money is that at least you will get advice. On the other side, it looks slightly different. Okay, so just a summary of the presentation, and then moving on to questions. Remember to write things down. This is a process. This needs to be systematic. Okay, practice will always make you better. There's a lot of things that you can improve. Okay, iterate constantly. Make sure you practice with different people, check their reaction, and this is going to be the foundation of any investor presentation that you have. Okay, I said that at the beginning, and I'll repeat it right now. Keep in mind that building a company is not fundraising, and it's very difficult to fundraise where you don't have something that is worth funding. Okay, and with that, I'm just gonna finish my presentation on this topic. So if you ever wanna learn more about some of the stuff that I do on besides investing, I'm also host of a podcast called the China Startup Pulse, where we talk with entrepreneurs, investors, corporates, and movers and shakers in the Asian and most Chinese startup ecosystem.
Thank you very much, Oscar. Now we will proceed to the Q&A. And there is a question from Carlos. He would be interested in knowing more about your approach to calculate the market size, how to find the equilibrium between the potential and the vision and the reality.
So the most